History tells us that being a king was the ultimate jackpot. You had the gold, the castles, the armies, and the absolute power to do whatever you wanted. But history textbooks often leave out the fine print. The higher you climb, the harder and messier you fall. Imagine being a ruler so feared that your own family conspires to eliminate you in a way that leaves no marks but causes infinite agony. Or imagine being a conqueror who reshaped the map of Europe only to have your final moment ruined because you couldn't fit into your own coffin? From emperors treated as furniture to monarchs whose own biology turned against them, the throne is often the most dangerous seat in the house. Welcome back to Ouch History. Today we are opening the royal archives to look at the tragic, ironic, and excruciating ends of history's most powerful men. These aren't just deaths, they are disasters. If you want to keep exploring the dark, messy, and painful side of the past without actually feeling the pain yourself, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. We survive these history lessons so you don't have to. Let's travel back to September 13, 1327, to the cold stone corridors of Berkeley Castle in England. The man of the hour is King Edward II. Well, king is a strong word because by this point he had been deposed. His reign was a disaster of favoritism and military failures, but his biggest mistake was upsetting his wife, Queen Isabella, and her lover, Roger Mortimer. They locked Edward away, hoping he would just quietly disappear. Initially, they tried the passive-aggressive approach. Records suggest they placed him in a cell directly above a pit of decaying animal matter and sewage. The goal was simple: destroy his immune system with the toxic fumes and filth. It was biological warfare in the 14th century. But Edward was surprisingly resilient. He refused to get sick. He refused to die. And that patience ran out on the night of September 21st. The Queen's agents decided that nature was taking too long, so they took matters into their own hands. But there was a catch. They couldn't leave marks. A king with visible wounds looks like a martyr. A king who dies of natural causes is just a tragedy. So they devised a method that is now legendary for its cruelty. While the king slept, he was overpowered. To ensure no external bruising, they used a hollow horn to bypass the skin and access his internal cavities. Through this horn, they introduced a red-hot iron instrument. The heat bypassed his skin entirely and burned his internal organs directly. The chroniclers wrote that his screams were so loud and terrifying that they woke people in the village outside the castle walls. It was a calculated, invisible inferno that cooked him from the inside out. When the deed was done, the physician proclaimed he died of a sudden illness. His body was displayed, looking perfect on the outside, while concealing the horrific truth of his final moments inside. From a king who died in secret, let's move to a king whose death was loud, messy, and incredibly public. William the Conqueror, the man who changed the English language and history forever in 1066. But by 1087, William wasn't the agile warrior he used to be. He had become immensely overweight, indulging in the spoils of his success. During a battle in France, William was riding through the burning ruins of a town. His horse, spooked by an ember, reared up violently. The iron pommel of his saddle, the hard metal handle at the front, was driven with crushing force directly into his lower abdomen. It wasn't a sword or an arrow that took him down, it was physics. The impact caused severe internal rupture. For 6 weeks, the most powerful man in Europe lay in a monastery, sweating in agony as infection slowly spread through his gut. Medieval medicine had no way to fix a ruptured intestine. He simply had to wait. But the real horror show started after he took his last breath. As his body lay in state, the natural gases of decomposition began to build up. But because of the severe internal infection, this process was accelerated. He began to bloat and bloat and bloat. On the day of his funeral, the monks tried to lower him into a stone sarcophagus. But there was a problem.
The stone coffin had been cut for a normal-sized man, not the swollen giant William had become. The attendants tried to force the issue. They pushed down on his body to squeeze him in. The pressure became too much for the compromised tissue. In front of the bishops, the nobles, and the mourners, the king's body suffered a catastrophic structural failure. It burst. The release of pressurized gas and biological waste was so overwhelming that the stench filled the entire cathedral. The funeral was abandoned as people ran for the exits, gagging. The Conqueror's final act was to clear the room one last time.
Irony is a recurring theme in Ouch history, and no one experienced irony quite like King James I of Scotland in 1437. James was a man of culture, a poet, but he also had a lot of enemies because of his harsh taxation. On a cold February night, James was relaxing in a monastery in Perth. He wasn't wearing his armor, he was in his nightgown, chatting with the Queen. Suddenly, the sound of armed men filled the courtyard. It was a hit squad led by a disgruntled noble. James knew he couldn't fight them off. He needed an escape route. The windows were barred, the doors were being battered down. He remembered a loose floorboard in the room. He pried it up and dropped into the dark, damp space below. It was a drain. Specifically, the drain for the royal privy, the toilet. He was standing waist-deep in the filth of the monastery. But there was hope. This tunnel led to the outside, to the tennis court in the garden. He could crawl out and escape. Or so he thought. Days earlier, James had been playing tennis in the courtyard. He kept losing his expensive tennis balls down that exact drain. Frustrated, he had ordered his stonemasons to seal the exit of the drain. Now, standing in the dark, smelling the waste, James realized his mistake. He had walled himself in. When the assassins broke into the room, they didn't see him at first, but then they heard noise from below. They looked down the hole, saw their king trapped in the sewage, and descended. James fought back with his bare hands, but he was unarmed. They ended his life right there in the pit. The King of Scotland died in a toilet drain because he wanted to save a few tennis balls.
Now let's look at the only Roman emperor to ever be captured alive in battle, Emperor Valerian. In 260 AD, he lost a massive battle against the Persian Empire and was taken prisoner by King Shapur. For a Roman emperor who viewed himself as a living deity, this was already the ultimate humiliation. But Shapur made sure Valerian knew his place. Historical accounts say Shapur used the emperor as a human stepping stool. Every time the Persian king wanted to mount his horse, the emperor of Rome had to get on his hands and knees in the dirt so Shapur could step on his back. But the physical torture was saved for the finale. When Shapur grew bored of his human furniture, he offered Valerian a drink. But it wasn't wine. Shapur ordered gold to be melted down in a crucible until it was a glowing liquid orange liquid. While Valerian was restrained, his jaw was forced open. The molten metal was poured directly down his throat. The damage was instantaneous and catastrophic. The heat would have cauterized the tissue immediately, cooking his internal systems in seconds. It was a symbolic death. The Roman thirst for wealth was quenched with liquid gold. But Shapur wasn't done. After the emperor died, his skin was carefully removed, flayed from his body in one piece. It was dyed purple, the royal color, and stuffed with straw. This gruesome mannequin was hung on the wall of a Persian temple for decades, a permanent reminder to Rome that their god was just a trophy on a wall.
Sometimes the torture doesn't come from an enemy, it comes from your own DNA. Charles II of Spain is the ultimate example of why family trees should fork. He was the last of the Habsburg line, a dynasty infamous for marrying cousins and nieces to keep power. Charles was the victim of generations of inbreeding. His life was a constant state of suffering. His jaw was so deformed, the famous Habsburg jaw, that his top and bottom teeth couldn't touch. He couldn't chew food. He practically swallowed everything whole. He couldn't speak clearly. He drooled constantly. By the time he was 30, he looked like an old man. He couldn't walk without help. He suffered from violent seizures that racked his frail body. But it was his death at age 38 in the year 1700 that revealed the true extent of the damage. The physician who performed the autopsy wrote a report that reads like a horror story. He stated that the king's body did not contain a single drop of blood. His heart was withered to the size of a peppercorn. His lungs were corroded. His intestines were gangrenous and decaying. Most shockingly, the doctor claimed his head was full of water, likely severe hydrocephalus. Charles II wasn't just sick. His biological systems had completely collapsed. He lived his entire life in a body that was essentially incompatible with survival, kept alive only by the sheer stubbornness of royalty. We end with a story of extreme brutality and extreme bravery. Sambhaji was a Maratha king in India who fought against the Mughal Empire. In 1689, he was captured by Emperor Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb didn't just want to execute Sambhaji, he wanted to break him. He wanted him to convert and surrender his kingdom. Sambhaji refused. He insulted the emperor to his face. The punishment was a slow, calculated dismantling of the human form. It started with his eyes. They used heated iron rods to destroy his vision. Sambhaji stood tall and refused to speak. So, they removed his tongue. Over the next 2 weeks, the torture became a daily ritual. Each day, a different part of his body was removed: fingers, toes, extremities. They would cauterize the wounds to stop the bleeding, ensuring he stayed alive and conscious for the next day's horror. This went on for a fortnight, a slow erasure of the king, piece by piece. Finally, when there was almost nothing left to torture, they removed his skin and finally delivered the mercy of decapitation. Sambhaji died without ever surrendering, enduring one of the most prolonged and systematic executions in recorded history.
From exploding stomachs to molten cocktails, the history of royalty proves one thing: heavy is the head that wears the crown, especially when that head might end up stuffed with straw or full of water. It makes your bad days at work seem a little more manageable, doesn't it? We want to know, which of these royal nightmares would be the absolute worst way to go? Cast your vote in the comments below. If you survived this video, you are officially part of the Ouch History Battalion. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into history's worst mistakes. Thanks for watching, and try to stay away from red-hot pokers.